Welcome back to these series of lectures on Western Civilization, Part 1. We've talked about some of those things that occur in prehistory, like human language and opaque documents, the investigation into human artifacts and what they mean. I want to sort of stay in prehistory today as well and talk about origin myths. And some of this will move into the Neolithic era, but some of it is born deep in history and beyond our capacity to know. You'd probably be surprised if you've never thought about this, but there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of origin myths. Virtually all societies have developed them. Different cultures, different languages, scattered geographically across the earth. The origin myths are remarkable in their variety and their ingenuity. But origin myths tend to have a few motifs that are common across time and space, and we'll get into that. I want to say a word here about the word myth. I think we have a misunderstanding of this word. If you're having a conversation and somebody says, that's just a myth, your general reaction would be that they're saying that that's a lie. We think of myth as being a falsehood, and that's a misinterpretation of the word. Myth pertains to explanations. Paleolithic and Neolithic men sought to explain those enduring questions that humans would like answers to. Why are we here? How did we get here? What is our purpose? What happens to us after we die? What's the origin of evil? These are questions that transcend time, and myths, including these origin myths, often seek to answer these type of questions. So I want to give us a few examples of this and then look at some of those common themes or motifs that you can find across time and space. I'm just going to give you some brief excerpts from some of these origin myths. This is from Central America. It says, quote, "Then while they meditated, it became clear to them that when dawn would break, man must appear. Then they planned the creation, the growth of the trees and the thickets, and the birth of life and the creation of man. Thus it was arranged in the darkness, and in the night by the heart of heaven, who was called Hurricane." This next one is a Pueblo Indian myth. "Your father made the world by throwing a clot of his blood into space, which by his power grew into the earth. He planted you within it so that you would bring to life all the things in your baskets, in order that the world be completed for you, so that you could rule over it." Here's an excerpt from a Mesopotamian creation myth. "His heart led him to create marvelous things. He opened his mouth and spoke what he had conceived in his heart. My blood I will take, and bone I will form, and I will set up man. I will create man to inhabit the earth, that the worship of the gods be fixed, that they may have shrines created by man." From the African Congo. The Kuba creation myth says that their first people, man and woman, were let down from the skies by an immense rope, from which they untied themselves, and then the rope was drawn up. An origin myth much more common to this audience. This is Genesis 1:26. "Then God said, quote, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and the cattle, and over all the wild animals and all the creatures that crawl upon the ground.'" Now, Genesis, of course, has more than one origin myth. That's Genesis 1. Here, Genesis 2:7. "The Lord God formed man out of the clay of the ground and blew into his nostrils the breath of life. And so man became a living being." Some people have suggested that the story of Noah's flood represents a third origin myth in Genesis, as the earth is wiped out except for Noah, his family, and those animals collected on the ark. So you could sort of endlessly argue about these things. But nevertheless, these origin myths suggest an attempt to explain a national origin of a particular people, especially here in Genesis. This is the one we know best. If you read Genesis 1 and 2 closely, you can see these creation stories attempt to explain the unique national characteristics of the Hebrews. And this is not a theology class, so we're not going to go deep into this, but I want you to be aware of it. Mythic explanation is the explanation available to ancient man, just as scientific explanation is available to us today in what we'd like to think of as modernity. Myth depends in part upon faith and the acceptance of tradition. Scientific explanation, of course, depends more upon experimentation and the replication of those results. Let me give you an example here of a phenomenon explained in antiquity by myth and in modern times by science. Ancient Norsemen believed the aurora borealis, the northern lights, and of course you can Google these and look at them, they're quite beautiful. They believed these were the reflections of light off the shields of the warrior maidens, the Valkyrie. Modern astronomers tell us they're caused by solar winds interacting with the Earth's magnetic field and atmospheric gases. Both of these are explanations, but only one of them can be verified. And of course, that's part of the scientific method, isn't it? Origin myths also have about them quite often this quality of anthropomorphism, that is, depicting something in human terms that is not human. We see this, perhaps the best example I can think of would be Michelangelo's famous centerpiece of the Sistine Chapel, where Yahweh, the Hebrew God, is reaching out and touching Adam's finger. This is the touch of life, as it's called. Here, the Hebrew God, Yahweh, is depicted as an elderly human with long beard and long flowing silver and gray hair. Again, depicting in human terms that which is not human. Even Yahweh himself, the deity of the Old Testament, has an abundance of human qualities. He's wrathful, he's violent, he's jealous, he's a warrior. He's seeking contracts or covenants with his people, his chosen people. He's preoccupied with reproduction. He's constantly promising Abraham and others a great nation if they will abide by his law. These are human qualities projected onto a deity. I want to give you some examples here of these common motifs that we find in origin myths. For example, mythical animals, animals that can converse with man. In our culture, I guess the most famous would be the scene in the Garden of Eden, where Eve has a disastrous conversation with a serpent. Again, it's not clear why the serpent is so prevalent in origin myths, yet the serpent is. You find him in a lot of these stories. Again, it may go back to what we talked about with opaque documents. The serpent has the unusual quality of shedding its skin, appearing to be rebirthed. At any rate, talking animals or animals that have been anthropomorphized, we find them here in the Garden of Eden. Another common motif is this idea of a mythical language that unites all people. And again, we can see a good example of this in Genesis as well, with the Tower of Babel. Here, man is creating this great tower that will reach to the heavens. Yahweh is displeased with it and scatters the people and separates them by language. Of course, we only become aware of diverse languages as we move out of our own sort of small, isolated villages. But there is this quality of unity among men with language that is ended for some reason. You can see it in Genesis and in other myths. Quite often there's a mythical paradise, a time before when everything was right with the world, where there was peace, an abundance of food, a place without strife and conflict. And again, our best example again goes back to the Garden of Eden before the fall, as it's called. You can see a good illustration of this notion of a peaceful place in prehistory. You can Google, what's the name of the famous painting? The Peaceable Kingdom, I believe it's called. Here you see man and lions and lambs and birds and all sorts of creatures living happily and peaceably together. So myth has the quality of taking us back to a better place, a place where we all could communicate, speak the same language, a place where we lived among the other animals of the earth peaceably, without strife and conflict. So let me sum up here for a moment. I'll give you one last example. It just occurred to me, and that's fire. How did we get fire? Fire appeared to Paleolithic man certainly as alive. It is animated, is it not? It changes shape. It grows bigger, and then it grows smaller. It can burn you. It can burn the forest. It can clear the underbrush for agriculture. It can cook meat to make food more flavorful and easier to eat. Again, we have explanations for fire, don't we? You've probably heard of Prometheus in the Greek myths, bringing fire to man and then being punished for it. I believe Prometheus was chained to a cliff, and then a raven or an eagle, some bird would eat Prometheus's liver each night. It would grow back and then would be eaten again. So we can see that myth attempts to provide us with explanations. And that's the significance I want you to take from this, is that mythology or mythical stories are attempts to explain the natural world around us, the phenomenon that we see every day, and then also to explain that phenomenon which transcends the human lifetime, which was here long before us and which will go on long after we are gone. So we've talked about three sort of big topics that take place in prehistory: human language and development of it, opaque documents, the first inklings perhaps toward the notions of life after death, and then origin myths, which are of course quite common, and we discuss some of the common motifs that you find in them. We'll talk about origin of religion and some religious terminology in one of our lectures to come. I'll close there. Thank you.